The idea of a forgotten, almost dead god is really irresistible, and I want to talk about it today on Greyhawk Grognard. The idea that there are older gods that have just been forgotten by humanity or by other intelligent creatures is one that you see a lot of in fantasy literature. It was handled in the Conan stories several times by Robert E. Howard and other authors. Obviously, you see it in the works of H.P. Lovecraft. It's just something that keeps coming because it's a very alluring idea. In humanity, and we see it in real history too. There are deities that we know next to nothing about because their worshippers have died out without leaving any real traces of their mythology or their religion, other than the fact that it existed and maybe a couple of names and a statue or an inscription somewhere that we have no context for. So it's the kind of thing that keeps repeating, and because of that, it becomes a trope that you can use in your D&D game, and it's specifically something that works very well in Greyhawk, although the general principle will work in anything. And obviously, in the world of Greyhawk, we have several examples of this. The first is the Elder Elemental Eye, right? The Elder Elemental God, which was first introduced in the Giants series and then in the Drow series, and kind of forgotten in the capstone Q1. Fortunately, I fixed that in Q2 on my website, so yay! But the idea that there's this God out there that almost no one even knows exists from the hoary mists of prehistory, and the player characters are now stumbling upon a remnant of that god, and a portal to bring in some of its energy into the material world, and they have no idea what they're talking about. Now, bear in mind that when those modules first came out, we didn't know what the elder elemental god was. If you were encountering that for the first time, it would have blown your mind if you didn't know, as a fan of the setting, that, oh, there's this elder elemental god out there and it has connections with this and that, and you can find here. There's a lot more information today than there was back in the 70s when Gary Gygax first uh, uh, introduced this concept. So it would have had a very different feel, and that is the kind of thing that you're looking to reproduce in the kind of adventure I'm talking about here. We see it again with Tharizdun, the lost temple of Tharizdun, and unfortunately, Tharizdun has lost a lot of his mystique because he keeps getting used. He keeps getting plucked for another purpose. He's extensively described in the Gord the Rogue novels. He is sort of a catch-all in later D&D, Greyhawk D&D modules and source books and stuff. They turn him into the actual elder elemental god, which is absurd. He's one of those catch-all villains, and in so doing, he has lost any mystique he might have had. But think about it: if you're going into that for the first time in the 80s or the late 70s, you're going into the forgotten temple of Tharizdun, and you don't know what's going on. Oh, you're putting on these weird robes, and you've got these torches, and there's this numbing cold, and then there's this floating thing, which obviously is some magical, horrible thing from the ancient past. Oh my goodness, you've had all this, this buildup of mystery, and that's what's lost today. And that's the kind of thing you want to recapture. So we you can call them a couple of different things. There's a silent deity, an ancient deity, and an eclipsed deity. There's all kinds of different terms you could use for it. But the idea is create something new, right? So but he's going to have left, or it is going to have left behind some physical evidence of its existence, whether it's an old shrine, whether it's an artifact, whether it's a small cult of devotees, that still exists in some forgotten backwater somewhere, or that's existed for time immemorial, by remaining silent and hidden in plain sight, in some city or whatever. And you can introduce the idea there. And this is also a perfect opportunity if you want to introduce old Lovecraftian gods like Cthulhu or Hastur or Yog Sothoth or any of those, this is a great way to do that. It's the same idea. You see it in Lovecraft's works all the time. There's these remnants of Cyclopean buildings somewhere out in the desert. There's this old cult that has endured all this time. It's a very effective image, and it's a very effective thing in a game. And if you wanted to do that in D&D terms, you could use my book, The Swords of Cthulhu, which does this. It has got all the information you need for cultists and things like that. If you're looking to do a specific um, a Cthulhu Lovecraftian thing in this vein, but to get back to the idea, you have these abandoned temples and shrines and things like that, or even if it's just a statue that you see in a shop somewhere, and you have and the cleric in your party doesn't have any idea what this is. You take it to you buy it for a few copper pieces, and you take it to a sage. What is this? No idea. You're more and more curious. You want to investigate. You go back to the shop. Where did you get this from? Oh, it was this guy, and you track him down, and then you find out that he found it in some abandoned ancient shrine out in the Sus forest or in the bright desert or in the Pomarge or something like that, and off you go adventuring. So you can use this sort of idea to launch a really cool adventure. But the way you do it, this shouldn't come across as just another temple, right? Because the whole idea is you're seeing the physical evidence of a being that has gone silent. So you want to take that idea of silence and bring it into the very architecture of the temple that you are creating, the shrine, the remnant, the physical evidence that it exists. So you want to do this. There's a couple of different ways you can do this, because you don't want to just have all these active things going off, boom, 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 boom. It shouldn't be like the temple at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? You walk in and things start shooting out the walls at you. The silence should become oppressive, and you should use that silence to build up tension, because the players have to. You got to signal to the players that something is going on here, but you keep what that something is hidden until the last possible moment, because it is a silent god. You can talk about the weird shadows. You can say, "Oh, there's these unsettling sounds that you half hear. When you turn to see where they to get a better listen to them, they kind of stop." Things like that. There's techniques, verbal techniques like that you can use. You could also just roll a die every once in a while. That's a classic DM trick, to do that. There's several different ways you can do that. And then the PCs come to the actual shrine, and they see the actual evidence of this dead god. But of course, it's not completely dead. It's just gone silent. So there are ways to awaken the god. And what happens then? That's what you see in the Elder Elemental God, the Shrine of the Eye, where you do things, and then all of a sudden the god reawakens and realizes, hey, somebody is interested in it. And then you can actually become the first acolytes of that god in centuries. There's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with that. It doesn't have to be that the PCs are there as an adversary for this deity. Maybe the deity is coming in, is a friend of the PCs, at least for a while. Maybe it's pretending to be beneficent, and it's actually awful. We see a little bit of that in some of the D&D cartoons like Vox Machina. But there's all kinds of things that you can ways you can play this. I know another way to do it, other than there's the shrine, there's the statue, that brings you there. But you could also have like the isolated cult, the coven of straggling last believers, that's coming in, and they've been there for centuries or eons, the last remnants of the followers of this god. And you can have that be a wonderful, wonderful hook to bring in the PCs and give them a real adversary. Because if you have this cultist going on, and you see this a lot in a lot of like Hammer horror films and from the 60s and 50s, that kind of thing. You've got these cryptic omens of things that are happening. Maybe the PCs have disturbing dreams, and that can work in the old shrine too. If they're camped out outside the shrine, they have these horrible nightmares, and you can even use those nightmares to tease what they're going to find inside. That kind of thing. So there's all kinds of great ways to do this, and then obviously the end game for this being is resuscitation. It wants to come back. It wants to wake up again. So the PCs are presented with this dilemma. Do we help it? Is it a good thing? And then that comes back to it could be good pretending. It could be evil pretending to be good. There's all kinds of ways you can do this. Um, but you should always give the PCs signs and omens and things like that. Maybe some weird things happen in the locale around the shrine or where the coven is meeting, where the ancient cult still remains. Maybe some odd things are happening, celestial events, rains of frogs, that kind of thing, to signal that something weird is going on, and that will also increase the PC's anxiety about, okay, we know something's going on, but we don't know what it is, and not knowing is the most awful thing for the PCs because they want to know. That's in their nature. Now, all of this goes on the theory that gods need worshipers, right? And as they gain more worshipers, they gain more power themselves. So a more popular god is going to be a more powerful god, and that's what they want. They want the sacrifices, they want the worship, they want the attention, and because that makes them grow. But what happens when a god wanes, when his followers disappear or are wiped out? He diminishes himself or itself. And this leads into another possibility. We have the shrine and the statue and the remaining cult. What if the god itself is out there in some deep glade of the wood, or out in the lonely howling desert, or in the mountains? The physical remnant of the god itself is out there. That could be a wonderful thing. Maybe it used to be an intermediate deity, and now it's down to the level of a demigod or something. You could play with the mechanics of it, but the idea that you could physically encounter the last remnant of a deity is something that you could really play into here too, and you could turn that into a whole. You could play that in the same kind of way. Is it worth helping this being or not? And you could turn it into a friend or a foe, or even a secret source of information. That the PCs just know he's there, and they can go consult him every once in a while. Like some mentor figure, but he's literally a god. But nobody else knows he's there, so he's not very powerful. You could do all kinds of cool stuff with this idea. So you can really use this idea to pep up a Greyhawk campaign and any campaign, honestly, because it gives you sort of a frisson between the regular pantheons. We get the Iridian gods. We get Saint Cuthbert and Hieronius and all that. Okay, we've your players are going to have dealt with them a bunch of times. Tritherian, fine. There are even Ius and Hextor and Incabulus and things like that. They're going to be okay. Yeah, we've met them before. They're old hat, but this is something completely new. Something that not even the wisest sages know about, and that is going to make it different, and that is going to make it fun, and that is going to make it dangerous. So, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but I would actually go either with a Cthulhu, mythos creature, or just make something up. Especially if you just make it up, just like Gary made up Thorsten and Gary made up the Elder Elemental Eye. If you go down that route, then the players aren't going to have any way of getting meta knowledge about it because you're the one with all the knowledge as the DM. So, anyway, I would love to hear what you think of this idea. Maybe if this is becomes a popular one, we could really tease it out and set up a whole example of it. If there's a lot of requests for it in the comments. So hope you're all doing really, really well. I will put up some links here that you can get to the Cthulhu book that I mentioned, and probably another video or whatever. But hope you're all having a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will talk to you all later.